Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null. Nice to have you with us today. From Edith Cowan University, which is in Australia, published in the peer-reviewed journal Nature Communications, eating apples and other flavonoid-rich foods lowers your cancer and heart disease risk. That's good news. I'll go greater into depth on that in just a few moments. But also today, I am very concerned about our loss of freedom of speech, our freedom to express a different opinion on important issues, the social media platforms that are now censoring anyone that has a contrary opinion, no matter what the truth of that opinion may be, no matter what real science and independent science shows. They've got their own ideas of official science, which is corporate science, profit science, and that's it. If you don't align with their views, you are persona non grata. I'm also going to share why I believe that what we're doing in protests, which is very important, and I fully support, though I do not support ever violence, and certainly not anarchy, and especially when you see how many of the people whose stores have been destroyed are themselves hardworking, very dedicated members of a community, and almost always people of minority status. So why in the world would you victimize them? How does that honor anyone's memory or what they stand for? But they're always anarchists, and they're always looters, they're always opportunists in every movement. Don't overlook the larger movement. Here's the problem, and I will address this only in a small way today, but in a major way tomorrow, because I'm writing an essay on that. I believe we have not learned our lessons from history. I believe that we need to go back in time, go back to all these other incidences and ask, okay, we had violence against unarmed people, we had violence against both minorities, all types of minorities. What came from it? How about nothing? Do you remember when 10 million people throughout the world protested in every imaginable way they could that we didn't want to go into the 2003 Iraq invasion? But we did. If there had been 100 million people, we wouldn't have stopped that invasion. So I believe we have to have a completely different new mindset of how to take an incident that this tragedy represents and make something good come from it. So I'm going to make suggestions tomorrow in depth about what we can do to stop this wanton slaughter. But I'm going to get into it today, and I'm going to focus attention on one person who did not cause a lot of change because of his sacrifices and the punishment that he bore for him standing up for his truths, Paul Robeson. And you're going to hear from him today in his own words. So first we start with the latest on health. In a study just published, scientists looked into the health benefits of a flavonoid-rich diet. And their findings revealed that eating foods rich in these beneficial compounds help protect the participants from heart disease and cancer. And that's important. And now they looked specifically at the Danes, who regularly consume moderate to high amounts of flavonoid-rich foods, and they had a low risk of dying from cancer and heart disease. And then they started to look further into this, and they found that this is a big deal, meaning the more apples, oranges, the more grapes, peaches, plums, pears, the more carrots, onions. Onions are really good food, the less cancer and heart disease risk you have. It's that simple. From the University of Sydney, this is a good study, and they actually did a 3-year follow-up. They found that those who had the most antioxidants had the least depression, or reverse it, those who had the least amount of vitamin C and were deficient in vitamin D and E, etc., and zinc, they had the most depression. So they find that if you're not really taking your supplements in food, juices, or in supplemental form, you're increasing your risk of depression, especially in men. This was part of the National Health and Medical Research Council and Aging and Alzheimer's Institute in the University of Sydney who did this. So take your supplements, vitamin A, E, C, and zinc. Those are the ones that were most important in helping to protect people from depression. from University School of Medicine in China, they found that the extract from the moringa tree could prevent cataract formation. Moringa is M-O-R-I-N-G-A. So that's important because you have a high level of, let's say, African Americans and Hispanics with impaired vision, and they develop cataracts. And the latest research shows that it's the second leading cause of visual impairment worldwide. So several risk factors are linked to cataract formation, like aging and diabetes and excessive exposure to sunlight, hypertension. And then, of course, those are directly linked, with the exception of sunlight, to your diet and whether or not you're eating the wrong foods. And unfortunately, only a small percentage of any group is eating the right foods. In fact, the latest study I could find showed that 97% of the entire American population are not eating correctly. That only means 3% are. So now when you're not eating right, your immune system is adversely affected, which means you're more susceptible to diseases of all types. So here's something that's this simple: moringa. The plant has a great reputation. It's a super high antioxidant, and that can prevent cataract formation. So you can get moringa extract. It's not difficult. This was published in the British Medical Journal Complementary and Alternative Medicine. So, also, there in this other study, they find that fitful, nightful sleep, meaning where you're having a trouble staying asleep, you're waking up 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you're not getting that deep sleep. That is leading to chronic inflammation and hardening of your arteries. This is University of California, Berkeley. So sleep scientists tie disrupted slumber to the deadly plaque buildup known as atherosclerosis. Simply stated, if you stay up too late, if you have electric appliances around you, electromagnetic frequencies like a laptop or computer, blue light or cell phone, all of those disrupt your brain chemistry. And that in turn means you're not going to get a good night's sleep. If you're eating late at night, if you have any caffeinated beverages at night, like a cola, and people do. All this. Noise outside, stress. And as a result of not getting a good night's sleep, you end up with clogged arteries. And you can't feel it. You don't know you have it until a piece of that plaque breaks off in that clogged artery, and you end up with an ischemic episode. So they're related. Don't get a good night's sleep and end up with a fatal heart attack. That's what it means. All the more reason to pay attention. Why? Because the findings were published in the current issue of PLOS Biology. And it adds poor sleep as a key risk factor for cardiovascular disease, which ranks as the top killer among Americans. Now, we're concerned about COVID. Okay, fine. I'm going to get into that in a moment, while we've been oversold and lied to. But how many Americans do you think die each week from heart disease? How about 12,000 every 7 days? Every 7 days. All right? That is a serious number. Anything we've told the American public? Nothing. Like it doesn't matter. But it does. When over a million Americans are dying every year from conditions that could be reversed and prevented. From the University of Manchester, cerebral vitamin B5 deficiency can cause neurodegeneration and dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It's not difficult to get vitamin B5, just get a B complex. You don't need a lot of it, but it's very important. We found that it's widespread, and severe cerebral deficiency of B5 occurs in Alzheimer's disease. And this deficiency was worse in those regions known to undergo severe damage, including the hippocampus and the cortex and the middle temporal gyrus. So vitamin B5, by the way, is the obligate precursor of coenzyme acetyl A, which plays myriad key roles in the metabolism of all organs, including your brain. In the brain, acetyl-CoA is the obligate precursor of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Now, I suggest you take acetylcholine every day, 500 milligrams, acetylcholine, acetylcholine, and that can make a big difference in helping your brain. Also, from Buck Institute for Research on Aging, published in Current Biology, they're also reconfirming that caloric restriction can extend a person's lifespan. And that's important. But then again, you have to look at, does it mean that just if you were eating bad foods, that by limiting it, you would extend the lifespan? It's not the same. If you have two groups of people, one eating the standard diet, but then deciding to eat less of it, and another group eating a very healthy diet and deciding to eat less of it, the one eating the healthier diet will benefit and have a longer lifespan, not the one that's eating the regular diet and it's unhealthy. So eat a healthy diet and then engage in moderate fasting. By the way, for those of you who are listening over the archives to this program, which is the vast majority of people, let me just give you that number again. Please write this down. The number to reach out, make a call, and download any 5 programs, 701-719-9976, 701-719-9976. Okay, and you can listen live over anywhere. You can be in Canada, you can be anywhere in the United States, many areas of Mexico. Just call this number. Listen live Monday to Friday, noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time, and Tuesday, the Progressive Commentary Hour from 7 to 8. 774-337-6068. 774-337-6068. I'm going to play a clip now before we go to a break. This is Paul Robeson. And in being challenged by these people were notorious. This is where you got the Hollywood 10, which was more than that with Dalton Trumbull and Larner and Edward G. Robinson. So many people had to come forward and denounce communism, and boy, they stretched it. Anyone who was with any progressive group was considered a communist. Red baiting was rampant, and Joseph McCarthy from the late 1940s through the 50s would champion this cause, the House Un-American Activities Committee. So it caused hundreds of thousands of people to lose their jobs, and it created what was known as the Red Scare. And a few people stood up to them, but no one ever stood up to them the way that Paul Robeson did. Unfortunately, and I would have done it differently if I was Robinson, and in my opinion, one of the most singularly talented and versatile people. Forget that he was African American. He was just uniquely talented no matter where he went in the world. And he was loved all over the world. In fact, probably loved and respected more in other countries than here. And they considered him a national treasure in all the different countries in Africa and Sweden, etc. Not in the United States. He did not get the scripts he deserved. He did not get the attention he deserved. But this is the exchange between Robinson and members of the Un-American Activities Committee.
Mr. Robeson.
Do I have the privilege of asking who's addressing me?
I'm Richard Ahrens.
What is your position?
I'm director of the staff. Did you file a passport application in July 2, 1954?
I have filed about 25 in the last few months.
In July of 1954, were you requested to submit a non-communist affidavit?
Under no conditions would I think of signing such an affidavit. It is a contradiction of the rights of American citizens.
Are you now a member of the Communist Party?
Oh, please. Please, please.
Please answer, will you, Mr. Robeson?
What is the Communist Party? What do you mean by that?
Are you now a member of the Communist
Would you like
Party?
to come to the ballot box when I vote and take out the ballot and see?
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully suggest the witness be directed to answer the question.
You are directed to answer the question.
I invoke the Fifth Amendment and forget it.
I respectfully suggest the witness be directed to answer the question whether, if he gave us a truthful answer, he would be supplying information which might be used against him in a criminal proceeding.
You are directed to answer, Mr.
Gentlemen,
Robeson.
In the first place, wherever I have been in the world, the first to die in the struggle against fascism were the communists. I laid many wreaths upon the graves of communists. That is not criminal. Chief Justice Warren has been very clear that the Fifth Amendment does not have anything to do with the inference of criminality, and I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Have you ever been known under the name of John Thomas?
Oh, please, does somebody here want me to put up for perjury someplace? John Thomas, my name is Paul Robeson, and anything I have to say, I have said in public all over the world, and that is why I'm here today.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that you direct the witness to answer the question. He's making a speech.
I ask you to affirm or deny the fact that your Communist Party name was John
I invoke
Thomas.
the Fifth Amendment. This is really ridiculous.
The witness talks very loud when he makes a speech, but when he invokes the Fifth Amendment, I can't hear him.
I have medals for diction. I can talk plenty loud.
Will you talk a little louder?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment loudly.
Sir, who are Mr. and Mrs. Vladimir
I
Nakiyev?
invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Do you know a Manning Johnson?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Do you know Gregory Kifitz?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Do you know a Max Jurgen?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Max Jurgen
Why don't
took
you
an
have
oath.
these people here to be cross-examined? Could I ask whether this is legal?
This is not only legal, but usual. By unanimous vote, this committee has been instructed to perform this very distasteful task.
To whom am I talking?
You're speaking to the chairman of the committee.
Mr. Walter?
Yes,
The Pennsylvania Walter?
that is right.
Representative of the steel workers?
That is right.
And the coal mining workers?
That is right.
Not United States Steel by any chance. A great patriot.
That is right.
You are the author of the bills that are going to keep all kinds of decent people out of the country.
No, only your kind.
Colored people like myself. And you would let in the Teutonic Anglo-Saxon stock.
We are trying to make it easier to get rid of your kind, too.
You don't want any colored people to come in. Could I be allowed to read from my statement?
Will
here?
you just tell this committee, please, while under oath, Mr. Robeson, the communists who participated in the preparation of that statement?
Oh, please. The reason I'm here today, from the mouth of the State Department itself, is I should not be allowed to travel because I have struggled for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. The other reason I'm here today, again, from the State Department and from the record of the Court of Appeals, is that when I am abroad, I speak out against injustices against the Negro people in this land. That is why I'm here. I'm not being tried for whether I'm a communist. I'm being tried for fighting for the rights of my people, who are still second-class citizens in this country, in this United States of America. My mother was born in your state, and my mother was a Quaker. And my ancestors, in the time of Washington, baked bread for George Washington's troops when they crossed the Delaware. My father was a slave. I stand here struggling for the rights of my people to be full citizens in this country. And they are not. They are not in Mississippi. They are not in Montgomery, Alabama. They are not in Washington. They are nowhere. And that is why I am here today. You want to shut up every Negro who has the courage to stand up and fight for the rights of his people, for the rights of workers. And I have been on many a picket line for the steel workers, too. And that is why I'm here today.
Would you tell us whether or not you know Thomas W. Young?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Thomas W. Young is a Negro president of the Guide Publishing Company. I'd like to read you his testimony, quote, Paul Robeson has no moral right to place in jeopardy the welfare of the American Negro to advance a foreign cause. In the eyes of the Negro people, this false prophet is unfaithful to their country, and they repudiate him, close quote. Do you know the man that said that?
I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Now, can I read my statement? It is a sad and bitter comment.
While you were in Paris in 1949, Mr. Robeson, did you tell an audience the American Negro would never go to war against the Soviet government?
May I say that is slightly out of context? May I explain to you what I did say? I remember the speech very well. 2,000 students who came from populations that would range to 600 or 700 million people asked me to say in their name that they did not want war. No part of my speech in Paris says 15 million American Negroes would do anything. I said it was my feeling that the American people would struggle for peace, and that has been since underscored by the President of these United States. Now, in passing, I said...
Do you know any people who want war?
Listen to me. I said it was unthinkable to me that any people could take up arms in the name of a man like Senator Eastland of Mississippi against anybody. Gentlemen, I still say that. This United States government should go to Mississippi and protect my people. That is what it should do.
I lay before you, sir, an article, quote, "I am looking for full freedom," unquote, by Paul Robeson in The Worker.
Okay. Now, I believe that was actually, I could be wrong on this, but it sounds like Stuart Whitman, and it believes that was a docudrama based upon testimony that he had made. The point is this. That is Paul Robeson, and he is speaking truth to the lie against the fascists who ran much of the country at that time. And what we need today is to remember how many people preceded the current execution of an innocent man of the crime that he was being arrested, or supposed alleged crime he was being arrested for, and that how little has actually changed. That my thoughts, and I'm going to go in these great depth tomorrow, is that first we have to understand history, and then we have to understand who the opposition is. If you think it's just the police and reforming the police, some 700,000, and to help people be able to live in cooperation with law enforcement and not be a target of law enforcement, then you've got to take a different approach. The current approach will not work. I'll give you examples tomorrow of all the different times that innocent people have been killed, unarmed people protested, and nothing has come from it. I've helped lead over 200 demonstrations. I've joined hundreds of others in my 53 years as an activist. And at the end of the day, you have to ask, what is the likely outcome when the cameras are gone, people go home, a moment of outrage has been expressed, but does anything fundamentally change? Let us remember that there were those who did not have the young youth by probably 1 million or 2 on their side. Mother Ann Lee, founder of the Shakers, who advocated for the rights of all beings, and since Shakers are prohibited from being engaged in political activities, they nevertheless bought slaves and then freed them. Perhaps first spiritual group in the United States that had black, white, and even Native American members. This was all before the Revolutionary War, and she died due to injuries from the mob, the person who thought they were upholding the rights of their religion before the rights of each person. She was a martyr. Ever heard of her? You should. Thomas Paine, Revolutionary War activist. What did he write? The Rights of Man. That is a great reading to show why we should all be free, no matter what our ethnic or religious or cultural backgrounds. Also, you had Elizabeth Friedman. This is back in the early 1800s, the first former slave to win a freedom lawsuit in Massachusetts. And William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist and one of the first male feminists fighting on behalf of women's suffragette rights. And Thaddeus Stevens, a congressman from Pennsylvania and one of the main early anti-slavery leaders before the Civil War. He was the author of the Constitution's 14th Amendment, addressed citizenship rights and equal protection under the law, and was proposed in response to issues related to former slaves, composed its clauses for due process and equal protection for all citizens, including blacks. Charles Sumner, another early anti-slavery leader who was the senator from Massachusetts. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, women's suffrage and leader and one of the most important suffragette movements, Frederick Douglass. You've all heard of Frederick Douglass, former slave and leader of the abolitionist movement in Massachusetts, New York, a women's rights and suffragette advocate. His civil rights platform extended to Native Americans and Chinese immigrants also. He said all rights to all people, not just to slaves, but to everyone. The first African American nominated for vice president of the United States is a running mate of Victoria Woodhull of the Equal Rights Movement. Harriet Tubman, former slave who was most active in her missions to rescue slaves and their families through the Underground Railroad, she was a recruiter for John Brown. Remember John Brown and his 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry? Also served as a scout and spy for the Union in the Civil War. Ida Wells, former slave and American investigative journalist, and she documented the lynchings. She was an educator. She was co-founder of the NAACP. Some argue the first famous black woman to get national recognition. She was awarded a Pulitzer Prize, but only after her death. Eugene Debs, a campaigner for the poor and women and those who dissented from the status quo and prisoners. W.E.B. Du Bois, black writer, scholar, founder of the NAACP, first black to earn a Ph.D. at Harvard. Eleanor Roosevelt, the human and women's rights activist, was given the name First Lady of the World, very outspoken advocate for black rights. And Rosa Parks initiated the Montgomery bus boycott, called the First Lady of the Civil Rights and Mother of the Freedom Movement by the U.S. Congress, later active in Black Power movement and supported political prisoners held in the United States. Daniel Berrigan, Catholic priest, civil rights leader, radical activist against the Vietnam War, nuclear weapons, used to come into the restaurant, the Fertile Earth, first gourmet vegan restaurant up on 108th and Broadway. That was the meeting of all the activists at that time. It was fun to be there every night because we'd all be talking. You could always tell when the informants or FBI were there because they always dressed very straight. Then you had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. You had Rabbi Abraham Herschel, the Jewish human rights leader who marched with Martin Luther King. You had Stokely Carmichael, who was a friend of mine. Winona LaDuke, the Native American leader. Dick Gregory, another. Dick and I were friends for 40 years. Cesar Chavez, the activist and union organizer for the farm workers. Harvey Milk, the gay rights activist in San Francisco. Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and Jewish and human rights leader. But I would not leave out of this temporary list Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, you may not have heard of her. You have to go back to the 1700s, but she was a British author of Vindication of the Rights of Men and Vindication of the Rights of Women. Perhaps the first treatise arguing women are not naturally inferior to men, but they appear to be because they have been deprived of education. She was married to William Godwin, a forefather of the anarchist movement. Her daughter was Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. Then you had Olympia de Gouges. She was Wollstonecraft's counterpart in France and a playwright. The most vocal critic of France's slave trade in its colonies, demanded women have the same rights as men in her Declaration of Rights of Women and the Female Citizen, challenged the practice of male authority, was guillotined during the Reign of Terror. And Karl Heinrich Ulrich, the German journalist and lawyer and the first outspoken civil rights leader who publicly came out gay and fought for LBG rights in the 1860s. You see, we cannot go forward with any opportunity to see major advance until we first understand all the movements that have preceded us, what they did, how they caused change or not, and what we have to do. And I believe that the enemy, the larger enemy, is not just those, and by the way, I want to make it very clear that not all police are racist. Not all police are somehow steroid-bound goons. Not all police. There are a lot of police. In fact, in my opinion, the ones I've known and befriended have been very decent, honorable people. And the one prided himself in saying, Gary, in my 24 years on the force, I never unholstered a gun. I would always talk through situations. So we cannot leave those individuals out by castigating hate against an entire group with no exception. Then it loses the credibility and meaningfulness of our arguments. We have to measure what we do. But I believe that what we have missed completely is the real enemy. And therefore, until we meet and face and confront the real enemy, nothing will change. And here's what I mean. I'm just going to give you an overview now, but I will go into this in great depth tomorrow when I publish an essay on the enemy of racism is more than a group. The neoliberal agenda is the enemy, supporting the power of capital over government and governance within democratic norms. Agrochemical industry, like Monsanto, that's the enemy. Big pharma and private insurance companies, they're the enemy. Big food and big meat are all companies connected to junk food. And with junk food, you then control a person's diet. You control the media, you control the advertising, you control what is being sold, and you control what is being consumed. And then you attack that which is actually natural and healthy. You attack organic, you attack soil conservation, you attack veganism, you attack those who are healthy and exercising, those who meditate and pray, those who engage in energy and adhering to a higher spiritual value. You attack those people if you're the skeptics on Wikipedia. And Wikipedia, in my opinion, is the most dangerous single one in the world because it reaches more people, and people go there for their truth. Could you imagine that CNN and MSNBC, which are the enemy, bring in people who are the enemy from the deep state, like Clapper and Brennan, and now Sally Yates and these other people who are the technocrats, the mouthpieces of the deep state? Since when did the liberal community think it was acceptable to bring in people who are the deep state to be the spokespersons for what is truth, when they have never known the truth? The fossil fuel industry and all the industries associated with fossil fuel extraction and distribution, the private prison system, the enormous network of private companies involved with the military-industrial complex and the weapons market. Do you think it is not slavery? Do you think it is not bigotry? Do you not think it is racism? Do you not think it is misogyny when you will make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year working for one of the 10 largest munitions companies or the military-industrial complex, and then you go into Yemen, the poorest country, and you starve 19 million citizens to death? Over 1 million children, you starving them? And what you did in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Libya and in Syria? And by the way, not a single thing ever said by the media, any media, Fox, all of them, they all lied when it came to assigning Assad responsible for the sarin gas attacks. He did not use any sarin gas attacks. We broadcast this on this program. It was some of the finest journalists in the world who went there and did their homework and found out it was the United States support for terrorist groups. Remember, we had the good terrorists? There are no good terrorists. And just keep this in mind for those who want to get rid of the police. Imagine looking at all those hundreds of Syrian soldiers who surrendered, and ISIS took them prisoner, put them in the orange jumpsuits, and put them in long lines, and then slit their throats and cut their heads off. Thousands were decapitated. Do you not think for a heartbeat they would not love to have no boundaries, no police, so that they could come in? No, those are the heavy-duty people. These are people that would just indiscriminately kill every man, woman, and child in America if they could. They would bring biological weapons in and put them in our reservoirs, and they're slow-acting poisons, toxicants, that can be in the water for a couple days, a week or so, and then suddenly so many millions of people drink that water, and now you have an irreversible biological weapon in your body. These are the people that would bring it in. They would bring in many nuclear devices because there would be no border patrol. There'd be no way to stop them. There'd be no police. Who would you call? A social worker? And think of all the sex slaves that we brought in from Central and South America. hundreds of thousands. Do you really want to support sex slaves trade in the United States out of some false ideology, some extreme position, without thinking through the consequences? If right now you have over 3.5 million crimes committed by all races in the United States, what do you think would be the number without the police? And who would be the first victims? Those who are already victims of violence, even though the vast majority of people living in all environments in the United States have never done anything violent or would be engaged in violent activity. They're just people trying to survive. And now the gangs, over 1.5 million gang members in the United States. Do you know the initiation rites for MS-13 and the Mexican Mafia? The rapes, the killings, the slashings? And what would happen when that all happens in mass? Where you have millions of Americans, except for those in the South or other places that are armed, you go on their property to do them harm, they're going to fight back. Well, what about all the others that don't? So think well before you make such judgments from young people who have no experience at life, have never contributed anything to the larger body politic or to the social consequences of their ignorance. Just blathering on and screaming and condemning doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that you have a solution to the problem. If you want to overcome a problem, then how about doing this? How about voting out any legislator that continues to support the private prison system? Shut them down. Stop everyone from eating junk food that causes disease and death. Shut them down. Don't buy them. Demand and go on general strike until we get Medicare for all. Stop using chemicals on your foods like glyphosate. And think of all the private network of companies involved in the military-industrial complex and the weapons market. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in the Washington area alone. And Wall Street. Stop using their credit cards. Stop using their banks. There is such hypocrisy when you say, I'm against the man, and then everything in your life is supporting the man. If you really want to support a way of changing the underlying rotted structure of society, don't keep repairing it by supporting it. You're giving them your money. You're going to their schools. You're eating their food. You're wearing their clothes. 90% of Americans are wearing clothes made at slave labor at 14 cents an hour in Bangladesh and other countries. Buy American-made union clothes. Buy food that is fair exchange, like chocolate from a country in South America that was not exploiting its labor. Stop the loan industry. Demand all interest rates be 2%. Forgive all student loans. Forgive all car loans. Forgive all loans. Stop using 5G. Stop supporting it. These are the enemy because these are neoliberals. The big tech companies, Silicon Valley, all of its automation and robotics. We think, hey, that's kind of neat, a robot, an artificial intelligence. Yes, and it's just taking your and thousands of other people's jobs. Don't support that which is your enemy. Don't support the intelligence communities and the companies that invent technologies for surveillance and monitoring of you. Look at the real estate regime. The most corrupt group in America are the realtors in the largest city, New York. They own it. They own the mayor, the governor. The landlords are utterly in contempt of anything that means decency. As long as you pay the rent or they throw you out. They don't think about you as a human being because you're not seen as special. You're not seen as sacred. You're not seen of value, except if you pay the mortgage or pay the rent. Beyond that, New York has now become a ghost town. It's virtually uninhabitable. And then forgive those. And they won't. They won't forgive people's back rent. And the entities pushing to privatize public utilities such as water and sanitation, it's already happened. The equity partners, the private military such as X, formerly Blackwater, and other mercenary corporations that carry on the wars around the world. The companies entering the geoengineering market, all subsidized by your tax dollars. The largest philanthropic foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, don't have anything to do with these people. Don't support them. So you see, unless you go back before the Revolutionary War, when colonies hired watchmen that turned into slave patrols. The first one formed in South Carolina at the end of the 17th century and then expanded to other states. And that's how law enforcement started, and that's how they became violent. Do you really think it makes any sense to send so many of our police to be militarized into Israel? Do you think Israel has got a good human rights record? That's where they learned how to put a knee on a neck, because they trained the American police as if everyone there is a Palestinian, and we've seen how they've dealt with Palestinians in the most inhumane and terrible way. It's the largest outdoor prison in the world, and that's where they're getting their training. What do you expect someone to come back and do if all their training is based upon feeling threatened by someone and then therefore taking the kill shots? That's not the way to have a police interface with the public. In 1951, the Bloody Christmas, after 7 civilians and 5 Hispanics were severely beaten by Los Angeles police, only small protest. But because of cover-ups, it was fictionalized in the novel L.A. Confidential by James Ellroy. In 1968, over 100 protests after Martin Luther King's assassination. The largest one was in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Chicago, Kansas City, Detroit, New York. What came from that? Nothing. In 1970, Kent State Massacre, shooting of 13 protesters, 67 rounds of ammunition shot in 13 seconds. It led to protests across the nation on campuses in 100,000 Washington, D.C. The results? Nothing. In 1992, Rodney King murder. Rodney King was beaten, and the results were over 1,000 protested and injured. 50 protesters were killed. What happened? Nothing. In 1992, the police killing a 35-year-old motorist who was parked in Detroit and led to a large city protest. Nothing. In 1997, Haitian immigrant 33-year-old Abner Louisma in Brooklyn, who was arrested trying to break up a fight in front of a nightclub, taken to a police station and sodomized, led to thousands of protesting in the street. Did that stop the police? No. In 1999, Diallo, 22-year-old West African street vendor in New York City, confronted at his home when police were searching for a rapist. When he reached for his wallet to show him his ID, he was shot 41 times and 19 bullets killing him. Hundreds protested. Did it stop the violence? No. Did it stop the profiling? No. In Stanford, Florida, shooting of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. In 2014, shooting of an 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson gave rise to the Black Lives Matter. Anything changed? No. Louisville, police murdered a 26-year-old African-American emergency room technician, Breonna Taylor, during a police raid on the wrong home searching for drugs. Nothing happened. And during the current protest, 22-year-old man shot and killed by police in Vallejo, California. A 20-year-old man shot in the head with brain damage in Austin. A Fort Lauderdale nonviolent protester woman fractured her eye socket from a police bullet. In Buffalo, police trampled a 75-year-old man, leaving him unconscious. And I would add in, and I feel it is terrible that the 77-year-old police officer down in Houston was killed. He was African American. And a lot of the police are African American and Latino. 2 of my friends, a husband and wife, the Ortegas, 24 years on the police. One will work day, one work night. They lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I filmed them out their home in Bedford-Stuyvesant. You can't meet a nicer group of people. You can't meet people who wanted to serve their community. You don't meet people nicer than that couple. That's the kind of police we want and need. Human beings who respect all life, who see the value in all of the people, and yet are still there to defend, but never had to shoot a person, never had felt so threatened that they could not find a way of taming down arguments and disputes and violence. So you see, we have to take a measured look and look carefully at the history, that nothing has happened up to this point. Nothing has fundamentally changed. We're still in the same paradigm, and we're going to stay there until such time that we realize Our protests are being watched by over 99.5% of the American population. They're not participating. 99.5. They're called the silent majority. They're from all races, African American, Latino, Chinese American, all and people of all different backgrounds, ethnicities. And they're all looking to see what can happen, what will change. They're angry. It's just that some people will take their anger to the streets and others hopefully will take it to the ballot box. But what happens when you don't have someone who represents a non-neoliberal, humanistic, and spiritual perspective, who cares about animals, cares about the environment, cares about other people, cares about going in and sending peace advocates in to help those countries that we've invaded, rebuild Libya, rebuild Syria, rebuild the Congo, rebuild where we've exploited for their minerals, and show that we are more than the ugly American. We are more than neo-fascist. We are more than neoliberal. We are more than the hegemonic, imperialist, massive egos of the ruling class. We're human beings. And we suffer when others suffers because we have empathy for all. Last night I took a few moments as I was writing the essay, and I turned on old channel movie that doesn't have commercials, and I just happened to be watching a film from the 1930s with Carole Lombard and William Powell. They had actually been married a few years before, and this was an interesting film. It was about a man. The opening scenes is a group of Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue celebrities were having a scavenger hunt. Now, a treasure hunt, you're looking for treasure. A scavenger hunt, you're looking for something that has no value. And so they were giving a person $5 if they agreed to come back because they wanted to bring back to their celebrity party a person that had no value, an unknown person. And William Powell's character went back, and he read him he told him off, you arrogant people. You see how some way to celebrate other people suffering. I'm sleeping on a pile of ashes down by the river with a lot of other people, and all you care about is your childish and immature behavior. It was a great movie for showing how superficial, how intellectually flaccid, how emotionally bankrupt the rich and powerful were at that time in the 1930s, the height of the Great Depression. And that would be as applicable today. And so you think, my God, we haven't evolved very far, have we? No, we even are worse in income inequality, in rights inequality. Now the government wants all of our rights. And that's why I'm concerned. I want us to look at what the real problems are. And tomorrow I'll give you what I consider the solutions to stop all this once and for all. To be able to address this so we don't have to have another outbreak of marches and demonstrations and condemnations 6 months from now when the next minority person gets shot by an overzealous, stupid person. So I will talk about neoliberalism as the problem because neoliberalism supports misogyny, supports depravity, supports the extreme end of financial hedonism and debauchery, supports racism, and by extension supports slavery. They're the ones who own the factories where all of the electronics are being manufactured with no thought at all about where people are now slaves so you can have your cell phone, slaves so you can have your dress, slaves so you can have your meat that is being grown down in the Amazon and we're losing the lungs of the planet so you can have a hamburger. So at what point do we start to realize we are also consciously or unconsciously, and I'd like to think intentionally illiterate on this, I will give the benefit of a doubt that people who are rightly concerned and rightly finding the courage to speak out and demonstrate will also then become part of the solution instead of being, rageful at the machine and yet supporting the machine with every purchase they make and every phone call they make and every transaction at a bank they make and nothing changing whatsoever. Those are just some thoughts. Just a few more things before we check out today. I want to read you something that I just came across. I want to thank Richard Gale. He found this. Now, this is from an FCC regarding 5G. And what it is, it's a person who wrote this, and it was official FCC proceeding. The date was, let's see here, September 23rd, 2016. And then the person was in Portland who wrote this. Here's what he says, quote, "This is the world we're living in now. This is neoliberalism. This is the enemy." Quote, brief comment. "Utilizing 5G has enormous surveillance capabilities and will be used and abused at the whim of law enforcement and the intelligence establishment. Millimeter wave is the same frequency used by airport scanners to see beyond clothing to the naked body. This frequency has the same capability when directed towards the walls surrounding homes. It enables a view inside the home where movements and activities of the people inside can be observed. It will be able to provide not only data about movement inside the home, but what products people are using. This is a massive crime against humans, animals, and should be stopped by whatever means possible. People need to educate themselves and others as to what the 5G millimeter wave rollout will mean to all of society. Millimeter wave and microwave mind control by Tim Riffett, UK Intelligence Forces and Microwave Mind Control. As a scientist researching into microwave weapons used on the general public, evidence that the GM900 microwave network, as used by Vodafone and British Telecom, is a major health hazard has come to my attention. Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, documents entitled Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Radiation, Radio Waves and Microwaves. Eurasian countries show that microwave frequencies similar to those of the cellular phones can cause health problems of the following areas: blood, cardiovascular system, cells, central nervous system, digestive system, glands, metabolic, reproductive, visual systems, internal sound, percussion. Equipment to test the frequency and intensity of microwave phones shows that they produce signals similar to microwave ovens. Two Vodafone cellular phones were produced 100 MW2 and 50 M respectively. The danger level of microwave ovens is 5 M, and the Russians regularly use 10 M for weapon research. These Vitaphones will therefore cause significant health problems if used. A variety of cell phones can be tested to see how dangerous they are, and it goes on for about 4 pages of information. No one in the world ever read this or heard it, and it's all fully documented and very intense, but it shows you now what they could use. By the way, that film was called My Man Godfrey. And I'm going to do a commentary. I'm writing a commentary about the best filmmaker for showing the great divide between have and have-nots and social and class differences in Frank Capra and his many films, Mr. Deeds and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. I'm going to do an analysis of all that coming up. And one other thing here, they're now using the technologies by Microsoft and Google on your cell phone to identify and trace every single demonstrator who's been participating around the country, hundreds of thousands of people. This is the dark side of technology. This is the neoliberalism. This is where they're in your life every second, hearing everything you say, even when your cell phone is off. This is where they're filming anything they can and will, and therefore they know every place you've been. And finally, for the media, the general media, this is, oh, well, Stockholm, or Sweden made a mistake. No, the actual person, Anders Tegnell, has pushed back against the media reports suggesting that he regrets not putting Sweden under lockdown, noting his comments about his country's COVID-19 response have been badly mischaracterized. The same epidemiologist insists there is still no, quote, obvious benefits to closing businesses, restaurants, and other venues in an effort to fend off the virus. Quote, there is no activities that we can point to as extremely vulnerable, end quote. And he said this to Sweden's Danjens Nigsten, adding that the country, quote, fundamental strategy has worked well. All right, and he's the leading spokesperson in that country. So once again, the American media, to cast aspersions against a country that didn't have the same type of lockdown, are now trying to make it look bad for him and that the country made an error. It did not. Tomorrow, I will give you an entire list of everything that you've been told about the COVID virus that is demonstrably wrong, completely wrong. It is no worse than a common flu, but I'm going to deconstruct the entire argument so once and for all this audience will know the truth about the COVID virus and the coming mandatory vaccines. That's the neoliberals, the Bill Gates, the Anthony Fauci's. Those are the people who want you to take their product where you have no choice. You have no freedom. It doesn't matter what the Nuremberg doctrine says. They're willing to say they're more important, and they're not. There's a way to stand up to tyranny. Tomorrow, I'll share what I suggest we do so that once and for all, we face the enemy, and we do it in a unified fashion. It takes 3.5% of the American population to make a difference, to turn a paradigm. Right now, with all the demonstrators out there, you have probably 200,000 people. That's not even 1/10 of 1% in a country of 332 million. Thank you all for listening. I'm Gary Null. Have a nice day.